Evolution Mythology, Cause and Effect, Chapter 5, A Slippery Path. It is not a coincidence that the idea of evolution came about in the mid-1800s. The very complexity of a living cell was a complete mystery at that time in history, and we, as a society, were very gullible and had just enough of a glimmer of understanding of the natural world to think we knew it all. Today, we understand that one human cell is as complex as the postal system of a large city. Who today would ever believe that the postal system of any city or town could simply happen by itself? No one with a mind. Many people who don't believe the evolutionary lie allow their children to be taught a deadly myth every day. A myth that teaches that the complexity of life just happened by pure chance. Evolutionary scientists have even gone so far as to state that no matter what the difficulties we face with the theory of evolution, and no matter how implausible it seems, it has to be true simply because life exists. Life exists, ipso facto, it evolved. And that type of logic is called the tautology, and it is vital to the myth of evolution. Tautology. 1. Needless repetition of the same sense in different words. Redundancy. B. An instance of such repetition. 2. Logic. An empty or vacuous statement composed of simpler statements in a fashion that makes it logically true, whether the simpler statements are factually true or false. For example, the statement, either it will rain tomorrow or it will not rain tomorrow. The guiding force of evolution is natural selection, which is described as only the fittest survive, so those that survive are the fittest. Imagine that. Evolution mythologists will not admit to the possibility of another explanation, because the only other explanation is a creator, and he cannot be put into a test tube or under a microscope, and it is not fashionable to believe the overwhelmingly logical evidence for a supreme being. The evidence of a creator is everywhere, if we but look for it. The fact is that most intelligent people who believe in the myth of evolution do so because they can't or simply will not face the alternative presented by a living creator and the personal accountability that implies. They are scared to death that there is a creator, so they stick their collective hands in the sand and preach the religion of evolution mythology to justify their actions or lack thereof. Mankind is traveling down a slippery path where most of the controversial issues of our times are interrelated in ways that very few seem to comprehend. What is needed in our schools and universities is a true and honest quest for knowledge approach that factors in all possibilities, both seen and unseen. If the scientific method was applied to the reality around us from an a priori of a creator, and the concentrated mental force of this world turned onto the subject, including the many fine minds that are today wasted on the myth of evolution, great strides could be made towards finding the truth of creation. Besides the evolutionists, another difficulty that any true search for the facts will encounter is the different factions within Christianity itself. Number one, fundamental creationists who believe a rigid Genesis interpretation of 6 days approximately 6,000 years ago. That's when it all started, period. Number 2, gap theory creationists who believe that there is room between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2 for an unlimited amount of time and an earth that was inhabited for thousands of years in the ancient and unrecorded past that was buried under the so-called pre-Adamic flood, and accepts the 6-day creation period, 6 to 10,000 years ago, as the beginning of this present era. 3, theistic evolutionists who believe that the Creator has created everything, but he used evolution as a tool to accomplish his purpose. 4, Christian evolutionists who are able somehow to embrace Christianity and evolution at the same time. These factions are, mostly, adamantly against any knowledge that contradicts their own position. Convictions that are, mostly, held as sacred truths, in each case, that do not allow for any modification. We need to step back from these kinds of rigidly held positions, and with cool heads and reason, we need to reconcile scientific conclusions with self-evident creation.